Hey everybody, Chris Traxler here, founder and CEO of Cirrus Technologies. We are a 24/7 managed IT and cybersecurity company based here in Dayton area. We currently support clients in 16 states and 3 countries, and we run a 24/7/365 live answer support desk and network operations center. And our core mission is to help our clients leverage the power of technology to give them a competitive advantage in the marketplace, and also to protect them from the myriad of cybersecurity threats that continue to evolve and grow every day. And a little bit of background on me: I'm a father of 5, I'm a lover of the outdoors, a connoisseur of good whiskey, and I'm passionate about protecting small businesses from cybercrime. So today we're going to talk about the security landscape, some best practices for working from home. We're going to talk about your weakest link as a small business. And we're going to also talk about, the few different types of companies and what COVID-19 has exposed. And really the best way to sum it up is a quote from Warren Buffett: "Only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked." And so some companies were prepared for this from a technology perspective, others were not, and it was very difficult to transition to work from home and a virtual workforce. So there's really 3 types of businesses out there that we've seen that have, come out of the COVID crisis. One, those that had no technology in place and really no ability to implement work from home successfully. 2, companies that had work from home set up for a few select employees, but limited technology and systems to accommodate it on a wider scale. Then 3, companies that have already adopted the modern connected workplace and have a coordinated strategy and plan. And they also have the tools and technology in place to easily shift to a virtual workforce. And so for 1 and 2, the big problem was, in the hurry to transition from work from home, many companies were forced to prioritize quick and easy over safe and secure when it comes to cybersecurity because they weren't prepared. So a few examples from that: a lot of companies opened up remote desktop to the world, which is a surefire guarantee to get hacked. A lot of companies allowed access to company IT systems from personal devices, which causes a number of problems. Ability to use Zoom proficiently and being able to lock it down securely so you're not getting Zoom bombed and having other problems. A lot of companies don't have a good voice over IP and unified communication solutions, so in a pinch, they were forwarding their business telephone to personal cell phones, which is less than ideal. And then a big thing is just a lack of password policies and best practices. Implementing work from home inherently means that you're going to allow more access from the outside world into your network. And without good password policies and protection in place, you're also exponentially increasing your risk to exposure. So, security landscape: hackers have a lot of new opportunity with the shift to work from home. And the bad guys know that your workforce and your employees are predominantly working from home. They know they're not behind a business-grade firewall, and they know that they may be accessing company IT systems from personal computers that don't have business-grade antivirus and firewall. And because of this, the bad guys are ramping up the frequency and intensity of attacks. Literally, the amount and intensity of cyber attacks, brute force remote desktop attacks with passwords that are found on the dark web, phishing emails, and COVID-19 scams have ramped up exponentially. So we're going to go through a few best practices, and here's what to do, and here's what not to do, and here's what you should be considering. First of all, if you're going to open up access from the outside into your network, always use a secure VPN to access company data and maps drives. And so we recommend an SSL encrypted VPN client. We also recommend using multi-factor authentication for your VPN, for email, anywhere and everywhere that you're accessing your IT and your data. Another thing is using good password policies and passwords, strong passwords. The reality is a lot of us have many passwords and many logins that we have to manage. And so if we're going to use good password hygiene, it's imperative that we use a password manager. Otherwise, it's very impractical to do that. And so we recommend a tool called LastPass, and there's a lot of good, really built-in security with that. Another thing is setting up secure remote access the right way. So in the instance where you do need to allow an employee to access their desktop computer from home, there's a good way and a bad way to do it. The bad way is just to open up remote desktop from the world so anybody can access it. A better way is using a tool like TrueGrid or Splashtop or even AnyDesk that will basically allow a secure proxy access over HTTPS to be able to access that desktop. Another important thing is, especially with work from home and using mobile devices, having a written acceptable use policy and bring your own device policy when applicable. And another big thing is just always making sure you can quickly control who has access to your data, especially with remote employees or with the need to terminate an employee. And so those are all things you want to do. Here's what not to do. And here's what we're seeing a lot of small businesses doing at their own peril, mainly because they're just in a pinch to make this work quickly. One is, it's very easy and tempting to just copy company data down to a personal thumb drive. The problem is then you lose all control of that data. And what happens if that thumb drive gets lost? What happens if that employee leaves the company and they've got all that data? You as the IT manager or business owner lost control of that data. Another is just allowing employees to move company data to unauthorized third-party cloud storage platforms. So let's say they have their own iCloud. Let's say they have their own personal Dropbox or Box account. And in the pinch to move to work from home, now you have employees that start sharing company data across their own cloud platforms that you don't have control or management over. Causes a lot of problems. The other thing is just allowing unfettered access to company IT systems from employee-owned computers. Anytime you have an employee-owned computer that doesn't have company managed cybersecurity on it, antivirus and all of that, you're allowing an unknown, unsanctioned device access to your network. And so with the threat with that and the risk is if that computer has a keylogger or other type of ransomware or cyber malware on it, it's very easy for your company passwords and your company data to be compromised through that machine. And then just in general, allowing any devices without advanced endpoint protection to access company data. We've seen some companies where they pulled out some old laptops out of their fleet that had been previously decommissioned, and they pulled them out in a pinch. They didn't have any tools on them. They didn't have any current antivirus. They were running an out-of-date operating system, and they threw them out into the field for people to use in a pinch. And again, in the interest of speed and efficiency, they sacrificed security. So all things to be thinking about. So important questions you want to be asking, internally. You want to be asking your IT department, your IT manager, and you want to be asking even with your executive team is, from a remote access perspective, what open ports do we have on our firewall? What's open to the world? A lot of times you might have things open you forgot about, or were opened at one point for a legitimate reason, but don't need to be now. So it's always good to go back and revisit that and look at that. Another question would be, how are we restricting access to our IT systems from high-risk countries? Give you an example. If there's no legitimate reason for anybody in China or Russia to ever access your company VPN login or Outlook web access through Office 365, then there's easy ways that can be blocked if you have the right technology in place. With a good firewall, with Office 365, you can use Azure protection and information protection policies, and you can use conditional access. Another question is always good to ask is, who has access to my data, internal and external? So are there guest accounts that have access that we've shared out using tools like ShareFile? I would always advocate looking at security and permissions on your file server or wherever you have your data stored and what level of access they have. I can tell you with probably about 9 out of 10 times when we onboard a new client and we go in and audit security and permissions, there are several confidential and restricted folders that the entire company had access to or could access unbeknownst to the ownership of the company. So it's always good to audit that, even just on a periodic, maybe annual basis. Another question, where and how does our sensitive data move about? So how does that data flow through the organization? Are we emailing lots of sensitive data between individuals? Are we copying it to personal computers? Are we copying it to off of a mapped network drive and a server onto a device that does not have encryption? Are we saving it on mobile devices? Those are all things you want to be thinking about. You want to have a strategy and be intentional about that. And that will really mitigate risk. The other thing is, what measures do you have in place to control data leaving your organization? Most companies that are using just a traditional, Server 2012 or 2008 file server have no control over anybody in the company just copying data off of that file server onto a personal computer or emailing it out externally to anybody or their personal email. And there's really good ways now with new technology, particularly when you're leveraging the power of Microsoft 365 and other platforms to control how that data can leave the organization. And you can put in policies in place that limit how it can, if it's personally protected health information, or if it's intellectual property, you can tag that data and eliminate the ability to have it emailed out to external users or anybody else. Another question would be, where can I find a written SOP, and what kind of process do we have in place to orderly terminate access for a remote employee, or even just any employee in general? A lot of companies are very unintentional about this, and they have no process in place. So they go and they terminate the employee, and they might disable that employee's one user account, but they forgot that user also had access to this and that data over there and those cloud apps. And so now that employee has been terminated, but still has persistent access to your IT and your data. Another good question is how are our critical systems protected by multi-factor authentication, also known as two-factor authentication? And so everything important in this day and age really needs to have that. Your email, if you're on Office 365 or Google G Suite, definitely should have multi-factor authentication set up. Any remote access, VPN, any cloud apps, like if you use QuickBooks Online or any cloud services, anywhere and everywhere you can, you should have multi-factor authentication in place. And that's going to provide you an extra layer of protection if somebody's password got compromised. So the reality is you can put the best cybersecurity tools in place, but end users are still the biggest cause of almost every cyber attack in the news. And so really, what do we do about that? What's the answer? Well, three things: training, training, and training. You've got to strengthen your weakest link. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit here, some options that are very affordable for small businesses and make a lot of sense. There's four key things here. One, dark web monitoring. So if we go back and look, I posted this on our company Facebook last week. Zoom meetings, there were about 500,000 worth of compromised credentials that were used and sold on the dark platform, many of which were valid passwords. And the reality is those old passwords are out there on the dark web. It might even be a password you changed at one point. But the problem is so many people use the same password or same password combination on almost every site that they log into. Even if that wasn't their password, it's very easy to get compromised. So dark web monitoring and monitoring your domain for compromised credentials being sold on the dark web, so you can make sure and intercept that and update a password as needed, is very important. Another one would be simulated phishing attacks. There's so many phishing attacks going on, and email is still the #1 attack vector for cybersecurity attacks. So company-sponsored phishing attacks, where you do a simulated attack, we use a platform that will use phishing emails that are out in the wild right now, and that allows, and basically that can test your entire user base and all your employees and see who clicked on the link, who opened the email, and who submitted the data, and then you can go back and remediate training with those people that fell for the phishing attack. Another thing is cybersecurity assessments. Really important to periodically do an assessment of all of your cybersecurity, your strategy, your systems, and look at what you have in place and evaluate it. The reality is the threat landscape is rapidly changing, and so is today's business environment, and your needs are always changing as a business. So it's always important to stay in alignment and shore up any holes in exposure. And lastly, ongoing training is also really important. So there's a lot of training platforms out there that can offer your employees training through easy videos, short videos, and some quizzes that they can take. Some of the training platforms even gamify it, so you can have a contest and see who wins the top score. And that training is vital because you're going to train your employee base on what the latest threats are and how to avoid being the guy that caused the cyber attack in your company. And the reality is no good employee wants to be the source of an attack. So if you lead with this as an initiative in the company, you'll find everybody's willing to partake in it. So with that, I want to open it up to question and answer. And if you have a question, go ahead and just post it in the Q&A, and we'll answer those questions. We've got a couple questions here. One is, what is the best option for a personal device for an employee? To answer that, it really depends on what that employee is using it for. If they're just needing to access email and maybe you know, like a OneDrive or something like that, they could get by with a tablet. If they're going to go with a tablet, then you definitely want to have some sort of mobile device management in place so that you can put policies in place in terms of you know, is that device up to date with patches and updates and everything else? And you have some ability to manage and control that device, if only the data that is relevant for your company. And so the nice thing with mobile device management software, if you're using iPads or Android or anything like that, you can create policies, even if it's a personal device, you can create policies in place that limit what that user can do with company data. And you can also easily wipe the company data off that personal device without affecting their own personal stuff if they were ever to be terminated. So I got another question here. Is there any more risk having employees bring a work computer back and forth when they want to work from home versus providing access to our server from their personal computer? I would always advocate it's a lot better to have that work computer brought back and forth, because that work computer is presumably company issued, has company antivirus and company patching and automation and management over it. And so from a device hygiene perspective, you're in much better shape because you know the health of that machine versus an unknown machine accessing the network that you don't know whether it's patched or up to date, whether it's running a current operating system, whether it might have malware on it or anything else. Another question is, do I need a firewall for my home? My wife is also working from home. For a lot of work from home, depending on what you're doing, there's a couple of different ways. So the reality is, in a lot of businesses' cases, they still have a lot of IT infrastructure and they have servers in their office that need to be protected and that you need to access. So in that case, setting up a VPN the right way would be the answer. And so there's different ways a VPN can be set up. You can do what's called a split tunnel VPN, and then you can do a full tunnel. So we always advocate in a VPN instance, you want that VPN to be a full tunnel, meaning all the traffic from that device is going to route through the corporate firewall. So you're much better protected. And basically what you've done there is you've extended the protection of your company firewall to that device when they're home, and you don't have to worry about having a firewall at their house then. Another question here is there any good awareness training that you would recommend? I've been looking for vendors and curious what we use. So we use a couple different platforms. One is the primary platform we use is through ID Agent. KnowBe4 also offers a training awareness program. The key though is having it properly managed and that's administered. It's not just a simple thing of just going and buying a subscription. Another question here, are random number generated tokens a form of MFA? Is this a recommended way to do secure logins? So yeah, most of the time that's what we call a one-time password, and there's different ways that can be implemented. You can use a one-time password app on a device, on a mobile device like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator or Authy or Duo. Another way to do that would be with a YubiKey that you plug in with your USB drive that'll generate a one-time password. But that's essentially what multi-factor authentication is. It's just a matter of how you implement it. Another question is, how long should it take my IT to set up my VPN? I've been waiting for over a week. The answer to that question really depends on how your IT is set up at your company. In general, if you have a good business grade firewall with a full security subscription, this should be fairly straightforward to implement and really shouldn't take more than a couple hours. I think where a lot of people get in trouble is they didn't have the right IT infrastructure and cybersecurity in place to begin with, and they weren't using business grade stuff. And so in that case, it's real. Then you're scrambling to try to put something together. But as long as you have a good business grade firewall and you've got a security subscription, it's very easy to set up an SSL VPN. And generally speaking, you would want to integrate that with your internal Active Directory through your server, or you could integrate it with, if you're on, as an example, if you're on Microsoft 365, you could integrate that with Azure Active Directory. And so that's really only probably 3 to 5 hours worth of work. Any other questions? Good questions, by the way, everybody. If there are no more questions, we're going to be hosting another webinar Thursday, May 7th at 2 p.m. Topic is to be determined, but it will likely be more of a deep dive on a couple specific ways you can leverage some good cybersecurity tools and leverage common tools like Microsoft OneDrive and SharePoint and Microsoft 365 to really lock down your IT and secure things. And you can access and register for that webinar and keep in touch. If you go to our website, SiriusIT247.com/webinar series, we're going to be doing these basically every 2 weeks. These are just strictly educational, really not much of a sales pitch here. So feel free to just peruse our website and hit that link, and we'll probably have the topic finalized next week at some point. With that, I will give you one last opportunity for any last minute questions. All right, with that, no more questions. Thanks for attending, everybody. I appreciate you joining and participating, and we'll see you on May 7th. Take care.